Gullit che salta tutto in tromba, da in mezzo Van Basten, gol! Van Basten, gol! Gol di Van Basten, stupenda!
Passaggio a Van Basten, rovesciata di Van Basten e gol, splendido gol.
El campeonato del mundo, robo de balón que pudo Van Basten. Le entró por detrás Basil Boli, amarillo. Además que no estaba haciendo un buen partido. Se veía incluso más.
The 26th of May 1993. Van Basten and Milan entered their third European Cup final in the last 5 years against Marseille. And after missing over 4 months because of injury, Marco came back for this important match. But after being the target of some tough tackles throughout the match, he was substituted in the 85th minute because of an injury, and Milan lost the final. But the real loss was Van Basten's career, after it was made clear over the years that this was the last match for the Dutchman as a professional. But how did Van Basten make that decision in the middle of his prime? And how serious was this injury that made him retire at just 30 years of age? Let's start from the beginning, when Ajax Amsterdam signed with the 16-year-old Marco Van Basten from Utrecht to join the youth program. And after Dutch legend Johann Cryuff returned to Ajax in the same year in '81, he used to train a lot with young Marco and the youth team to pass his experience to the new Dutch generation. And at the end of the season, Van Basten made his professional debut, replacing Cryuff in the second half. He also scored his first goal as a professional within 10 minutes of entering the match. His goal-scoring prowess was obvious, and after being used as a substitute throughout the next season, the team's and Europe's top goal-scorer Wim Kieft transferred to the Italian club Pisa in the summer, which opened a door of opportunity for Van Basten to be the starting striker at the age of 18. And in the next 4 seasons between 83 and 87, Van Basten was the top goal scorer in the league and top goal scorer of Europe in 86, when he scored 37 goals in 26 matches domestically. And all of this helped Ajax in winning titles, especially after Cryuff returned as a manager in 85. But in December of 86, the Dutchman's struggles with injuries had started, after he twisted his right ankle and also after deciding before the winter break to do surgery on his left ankle, after it was causing him problems since the beginning of 86 with advice from the Swiss doctor René Marty. But despite of all the injuries, Van Basten managed to score 138 goals in 145 matches when he became a starter. But what truly made him special was that he can score from any situation, with his right foot, a left chip, a header, or an overhead kick.
Wouters, Van Basten, schitterend! Schitterend, Marco Van Basten!
Van Basten was a complete striker in the fullest sense of the word. And in the span of 5 years, the Dutchman and his team achieved a lot. But the same cannot be said about AC Milan.
10 giocatori, 9 di Serie A, 2 di Serie B e il presidente di una società calcistica, cioè Colombo, presidente del Milan, sono stati arrestati oggi.
After achieving the scudetto and the first gold star in '79 with the help of club legend Gianni Rivera in his last ever season, Milan was relegated to Serie B 2 times in the next 3 years. The first time was because of the Totonero betting scandal in 1980, which changed Italian football forever. And the second time was the result of bad performances throughout the 81-82 season. But the Rossoneri was quickly back to Serie A, and after average seasons without any titles under legendary manager Lidholm, and after Milan was close to being bankrupt, in came media tycoon Silvio Berlusconi and bought the club on the 20th of February 1986 to turn a new and exciting chapter for Milan. Van Basten signed with Milan along with his Dutch compatriot Ruud Gullit in the 87 Mercato. Berlusconi also brought in Arrigo Sacchi from Parma in the second division after defeating Milan in the Coppa Italia, which was a controversial decision at the time, as Sacchi was basically a nobody and was not a former player and his coaching resume was limited. The Italian Football Federation at that time only allowed for 2 foreign players for each team, so the 2 slots were extremely important. So when Van Basten was constantly nursing an injury through October, There were internal discussions about the severity of the injury and whether the Dutchman came from Ajax already injured. Van Basten wrote in his recent autobiography that he expected his injury would be healed in the long summer and he would join Milan ready for the season. But at the start of training camp in August, his ankle problems came back again, and the medical team along with Berlusconi noticed the injury. Marco then took the advice of independent doctor Antonio Viladut from Barcelona, who insisted on doing surgery on the Dutchman's ankle. Antonio also said that Marco played his last season in Ajax while possibly injured, which caused permanent damage on the cartilages of the Dutchman's ankles. Marco then missed 6 months and 19 matches in the league, but Milan managed to challenge for the scudetto thanks to contributions from Europe's best player Ruud Gullit and Arrigo Sacchi's strong system. The challengers were title holders and representatives of the South, Napoli, led by the Magica trio of Maradona, Giordano and Chereca. The race was still on till the end as Marco managed to come back on the bench in a fateful match against Napoli in the São Paulo. 1 point separated the two teams with 3 matches to go, and the São Paulo was on fire. After Milan opened the scoring through the Italian striker Verdis, Napoli equalized with a signature Maradona free kick. And in the 68th minute, Verdis scored again after Gullit passed his man easily and crossed. And then Van Basten entered to ice the match. To push Milan to the top of the standings and earn their first scudetto since '79. But Marco was honest and wrote in his book that the scudetto didn't mean much to him as he missed most of the season. So Van Basten targeted the Euros to introduce himself to the world.
Had a tough season, but a little bit tired also. He was fresh.
Basten! It's Van Basten! It's a goal for Holland! 2-1 Holland! Van Basten! It's a hat-trick! Ja! Marco Van Basten! 2-1 vlak voor tijd! Marco Van Basten!
After Marco introduced himself to the world, now's the time to introduce himself to the Rossoneri faithful.
Il tiro, il gol da parte di Marco Van Basten.
Van Basten continued his fine form in his second season with Milan, and his contributions in the summer and in the beginning of the season earned him the Ballon d'Or, with his Dutch teammate Gullit coming in second and Rijkaard in third place, who came to Milan after the foreigners' limit was changed in the summer to complete the famous Dutch trio. But after the German Lothar Matthäus joined Inter Milan, the Nerazzurri managed to overcome the Rossoneri in the league. So Milan focused on the European Cup, and after barely winning against Red Star and Werder Bremen, they faced Real Madrid in the semi-finals. And Van Basten managed to equalize in the Bernabeu with an amazing header. But Milan played the historic match in the return leg when the Rossoneri scored 5 goals in the San Siro, with Van Basten scoring a great goal with his left foot. For Milan to book a place in the final in the Camp Nou to face Romanian side Steaua Bucharest, title holders in '86. News came in the day of the final that the Rossoneri fans filled the Camp Nou in a scene that would not be replicated again, as Van Basten and Milan managed to produce one of the most dominating performances in a European Cup final ever, as the Rossoneri won by 4 goals to 0, and for Milan to lift their first European Cup since '69. A minor surgery on Marco's left knee made him miss a month from the start of the next season. But Van Basten quickly came back to his best within the next 3 months of the season and earned his second Ballon d'Or in a row. But the Dutch striker missing a month and Gullit missing most of the season resulted in a bad start for Milan in the league. but the Rossoneri managed to win the Club World Cup in Tokyo against Atlético Nacional from Colombia. And after returning to the league, Van Basten managed to score 19 goals in the last 25 matches to push Milan back to the top of the standings with 4 matches to play. But a couple of controversial refereeing decisions stopped Milan in their tracks. The first case was when the Italian Federation gave Napoli the 3 points against Atalanta after some fan altercations in Bergamo. The second case involved a strange refereeing performance when relegation-bound Verona hosted Milan, in which the referee sent off manager Arrigo Sacchi, Frank Rijkaard, Costa Curta, and Van Basten, who refused to complete the match after taking off his shirt, protesting the referee's decision. But Milan's European form was still strong as they beat Benfica in the European Cup final. Rijkaard scored the only goal after a nice assist from Van Basten to raise the Rossoneri's second European title in a row.
Milan vince la sua Coppa dei Campioni, seconda consecutiva, quarta della sua storia. Il Benfica aveva atteso questa rivincita.
When you apply the same system with the same high energy levels and the same strict training regimes, and you participate in an enormous amount of matches in 3 years, it's only natural to have internal conflicts. But Van Basten's relationship with Sacchi was like a ticking time bomb since the Dutchman signed with the team. Van Basten's respect for Cryuff and his way of coaching was not a secret in Milano. So when Marco was stalling the renewal of his contract in 1989, Cryuff was close to signing the Dutchman when he was at Barcelona. But Van Basten was Berlusconi's favorite player, so he refused any offer from the Catalonian club. And as long as the Rossoneri was winning, Marco's problems with Sacchi were swept under the rug. So when Milan entered the hard period through the new season, the cracks started to appear, after Van Basten refused to play in a match against Pisa in the middle of the season. Marco was also in the middle of a scoring slump, and his quotes showed his frustration with how Milan was set up and how he was not enjoying himself in the field. And one of the reasons was lack of support in attack. So in came Berlusconi and solved the problem for now. And Sampdoria, led by Mancini, Vialli and the Yugoslavian Boskov, were on their way to a historic scudetto. So the Rossoneri focused on the European Cup again, but this time the European journey was not so kind, as they faced Marseille in the quarterfinals with Van Basten disqualified for the 2 matches after being sent off in the previous round. After the first leg ended with a goal apiece in Milan, Chris Waddle scored in the Velodrome in the 75th minute. But the match was suspended after one of the floodlights turned off in the 87th minute. And after the floodlights came back on again, Milan refused to continue the match, as media outlets obstructed the game as they entered the field. So the referee whistled to signal the end of the match, and Milan exited the European Cup. The last confrontation between Van Basten and Sacchi happened after that, as Marco wrote in his autobiography and said that Sacchi came to me to talk about tactics for the umpteenth time. So I burst and interrupted and said that Milan's success in the last couple of years was not because of you, but it happened despite your presence. A shocked Sacchi went to Berlusconi to give him a choice. It's either me or Van Basten. And Berlusconi chose the Dutchman, so the Italian had no choice but to leave. Berlusconi brought in Fabio Capello, who coached Milan briefly after Lidholm left in '87 before Sacchi's arrival. He then worked as a commentator for Berlusconi's sports channels. As Sacchi, the coaching experience was minimal, but unlike Sacchi, Capello had a great and long football career, as he played for big clubs like Milan, Juve and Roma. And his relationship with Van Basten was excellent, as he talked in the players' language. But various media outlets had doubts in the beginning over whether Capello can control the players. But all those doubts vanished in October, win after win, and Van Basten on top of the goal-scoring charts, as he scored 100 goals in total for Milan since his arrival, to join club legends like Nordal, Rivera and Altafini. And after the events in Marseille, UEFA banned Milan for 1 year from all European competitions. So the focus was on the scudetto, which abandoned the Rossoneri since Sacchi's first season, when Van Basten played only a handful of games. So the desire was strong and evident. And Marco fulfilled all of his footballing dreams, as it was one of the most entertaining and attacking sides in Capello's coaching career. Big wins like 5-0 against Napoli, 4-1 against Roma, and 5-1 against title holder Sampdoria. Milan won the scudetto as invincibles, and Van Basten scored 25 goals with 10 assists in 31 matches. A rare feat for any striker at that time or ever. But after missing a crucial penalty in a disappointing European campaign with the Netherlands,
Denmark have defied all the odds to reach the final.
Van Basten came back in the same form in the next season and was awarded his third Ballon d'Or, to join two special players, Platini and Cryuff, whom accomplished this feat. But 2 weeks after receiving the award, Marco took a decision that he still regrets to this day, when he decided to do surgery on his ankle, which was troubling him the last couple of months. His decision came against club's Dr. Tavana and against Milan's desire for the surgery to be done in the summer. But Marco was adamant about doing surgery and was confident in the Swiss Dr. Marti, who has worked on the Dutchman's ankle in '86. The Swiss doctor told him that he was going to clean the ankle, as it is called, and heal the cartilages. He also mentioned that physical therapy will take 6 weeks and he'll go back to training in February. But after surgery, Marco felt a sharp pain in his ankles, a new kind of pain that he didn't experience before. His ankles were red and swollen at all times. Even after 6 weeks, the pain was still there, which extended the healing process. And after Milan managed to book a place in the Champions League final, Marco managed to get back to the field against Udinese to bring back his fitness before the big European clash. Milan were also on their way to a second straight scudetto, so Marco played 2 complete matches against Ancona and Roma and managed to score a goal. But the pain was still there and his condition didn't get any better after the surgery. So Van Basten went before the final to the Belgian Dr. Martens, who has done surgery on Gulit's knee in the past. And the Belgian doctor told him that Marco has to do surgery again after the final. So the Dutchman made a decision he has not taken before and decided to play with an injection on his right ankle to ease the pain, and enter the field for the final against Marseille in the Olympiastadion, Bayern Munich's old stadium, and the same stadium that hosted the '88 European final when Marco introduced himself to the world. And after a tough match with chances here and there, the French outfit scored through a volley header. Marco failed to put his stamp on the match with one leg, and Capello decided to sub him in the 85th minute. And Marseille eventually managed to win the big European trophy. We know that Marco was injured. However, if you told any football fan at that time that Van Basten, at 28 years of age, will never play a professional match again, they would have told you that you're insane. There were absolutely no indications for that on the outside, but with each passing month, the idea was getting more and more realistic. Marco followed the Belgian Dr. Martens' advice and did the surgery on his ankle after the final. And Martens told him that he figured out where the Dr. Marti has done wrong in the last surgery, and he'll do a better job in cleaning his ankle. But months have passed after the surgery with no improvements. And Marco felt isolated from the team as he saw Milan beat Barcelona in the Champions League final from the stands. The Dutchman tried everything to fix the problem with his ankle, from acupuncture and faith healing to using Chinese herbs, but with no use. 1 year has passed after the last surgery, and the Belgian Dr. Martens brought up Elizarov's device, which is used to treat complex bone fractures and other deformities. The idea behind it was to pin through the bones and pull the tibia and ankle apart to create space for new connective tissue to grow. Martins told Marco that he doesn't have anything to lose and this is his last choice. So in June of 1994, 22 pins were inserted in Marco's shins and foot. Van Basten mentioned that the time before Elizarov's device was hard, but his 3 months with the device was like hell. Sleepless nights, constant pains, high fevers, the difficult task of cleaning the device and dealing with inflammation 3 times a day. And after finally removing the device, Marco's ankles were shot and couldn't handle any weight whatsoever. And until spring of 1995, the pain didn't stop, and the painkillers from Club Dr. Tavana were almost finished. So the reality was this: Marco, at 30 years of age, could not do any simple activity. Even getting up from his bed was a hard task. He then entered in a tough mental state and felt bad for receiving his salary from Milan, although he didn't play the last 2 seasons. Marco eventually had the courage to call Berlusconi to initiate a press conference.
Che lui ha contribuito ad arricchire con tante vittorie conquistate negli ultimi 8 anni.
La notizia è corta, semplicemente ho deciso di smettere a fare il calciatore, tutto lì.